You got to remember that I was hired in the late 80s. The last woman who was hired was 1972. There were no other women in the faculty. She's gone. I'm the only one left now. I'm the only female in the studio program. I am the only female tenured faculty. I am the only female full professor. I am it. That's it. There isn't any others, only sessionals. Nobody else has been able to stand it. I've had faculty, women, say to me, Sharon, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm going somewhere else. I don't know how you can stand it. And I just say, well, I made a commitment. I'm going to stick it out. Susan Gablick was a noted art critic, who is a noted art critic, came to Winnipeg shortly after I arrived. And her claim is something that I really support. She says that one of the peculiar developments in our Western world is that we're losing our sense of the divine side of life, the power of imagination, myth, dream, vision. The particular structure of the modern consciousness, centralized in a rationalizing, abstracting, and controlling ego, determines the world we live in and how we perceive and understand it. I thought that was very apt for the art school. And without the magical sense of perception, we do not live in a magical world. We no longer have the ability to shift mindsets and perceive other realities, to move between worlds as the ancient shamans did. And I mean, if you look at my work, a lot of it is about the kind of ritualistic, shamanistic idea. And she said one way to access these worlds is through ritual, where something more goes on that meets the eye, something that's sacred. Many people are still only comfortable with the image of an artist as a maker of objects, circulated in a network of art-related institutions like galleries and museums. And how many artists do feel free to work outside their field? And how many are willing to blur the distinctions between art and life, to muddy the waters of art and create a healthy confusion of genes? That's what I was trying to do. And her goal, my goal, was to propel us beyond either thinking or acting in a coexistence of nested truths. In this model, no particular discipline is privileged. They're all integrated into an open unity. And as Baudrillard said, when everything is aesthetic, art disappears. And he suggested returning to ritual as a way to revive art again. And these things meant a lot to me. But when she first came to Winnipeg, which was just a little after I arrived, she was booed at the Winnipeg Art Gallery. There were a bunch of fellows who basically got up and slammed her, and she was booed. And I'm sitting there and going, oh shit, I'm in big trouble. Because I'm sitting there thinking, yes girl, you go, this is awesome. So anyway, I think that was the universe's way of letting me know what I was in for. And my work and my time in LA, my graduate school experience, exposed me to women and men who were performance artists. It was California. There was a history of political activism, diversity, culture. It was what I responded to and what I wanted to teach. And the work that I do and the work that I admire is in performance art, ritual, and art that's in the service of humanity. I used to work underground at this club called the Lhasa Club, and it was a performance nightclub. They didn't have a liquor license to sell booze. We made smoothies behind the bar, and Rachel Rosenthal would sit there and talk about performance art and do performances, and Suzanne Lacey, and all of these amazing people. And this is what I was fed on. Suzanne Lacey with her elderly and youth in the criminal justice system. She did the Hillside Strangler performance with 9 women mourners dressed in black, towering 7 feet tall, emerging from a hearse at the steps of LA City Hall because they weren't doing anything about this. In memory of the victims of violence wreaked upon women. I'm here for the rage of all women. I'm here for women fighting back. And those things have a very profound influence. They really made art meaningful to me. My first degree was in psych, and I'd spent time working in Manitoba Youth Center in Stony Mountain Penitentiary. That was like looking down the anus of the universe, let me tell you. And when I came back to Winnipeg, social activism was really important to me. I started working with Power, prostitutes, and other women for equal rights, and then after about 8 years there, I started working with TERF, which is Training and Employment Resources for Females. It's rescuing young women who were in prostitution, age 12, 13, 14, off the streets. And, I would do art as an activity to kind of restore their sense of self and dignity. I mean, even Mike Kelly's work, as bad boy as it looks and as punk as it looks, he's actually a very moral and very passionate man. And there's a book about Mike Kelly called Catholic Tastes, and it really does talk about his morality. And his work really is, at the core of it, about dignity and kindness. And, because I did what I did, I received a lot of teaching awards. And Dale's comment was, well, your teaching evaluations are always stellar. What do you do? And I laughed at him as you're in for your faculty evaluation. I said, well, Dale, I pray for my students. And he just went on the floor. And I mean, it was half joking, but the idea was that I cared to get into the mind of each of my students and make an experience for them the way I wish I had had it made for me. And I think that when you are connecting with somebody like that, it can never be wrong. And even if you make a mistake, your intentions are good, so it can be forgivable mistakes. You don't have to be afraid of taking a risk. One of my former students wrote an article about me for a magazine, and she used the words feared and revered, and I thought, I really like that. It was kind of nice, kind of like an awesome fear. So, I've always believed, and I've always told my students that I believe that they should just tell their own stories. Your stories are as unique as your fingerprint. If you stick with this modernist notion of genius, I think you wind up back into a corner. I mean, what would Jackson Pollock have done if he hadn't been killed? Or Rothko? I mean, once you find a style like that, you can never move on because you're a genius. And if you change, it's like, well, were you wrong then or are you wrong now? So, but if you tell your own story, whatever style you need, it doesn't matter. It's okay. So, share your stories. Work on trust. Work on kindness. I mean, I still remember, to this day, wanting to be an artist and being accepted at the art school to study, and how thrilled I was that I was given this privilege. I can go to art school. Oh, I'm so lucky. All those people who couldn't go. All those people who weren't accepted. And I promised myself I would never forget that feeling, because I know that everyone coming into the art school, they all had that feeling at some time. It might have been driven out of them. They might have gotten cynical. Life might have happened. But they had that. I was just a little gal from a prairie town with a powerful, intense desire to be an artist. And none of my family, they were blue-collar workers. My dad made $10,000 a year at one time. I mean, grade 6 education. But, it was like I was over the top that I could do this. Boyes was one of the first, Joseph Boyes was one of the first to put forward the radical idea of artist social sculpture. And he laid claim to the fact that art didn't have to be made from specific materials. And, he also talked about as teaching as a great privilege. And as Gablick suggested, we're slowly moving away from an era of the disciplinary big bang and relentless specialization. She says strategic changes are happening. She says it much better than I do, in which the individual artist becomes an integral component of a larger social network. Specialization may still be the most general trend we know, but a significant number of artists have extended artistic activity into social and environmental domains, transcending disciplinary boundaries. And schools are full of stuff, and art schools, I believe, do make sense by not making sense to some degree. But I was always intrigued by Capral's distinction of art like art and art like art and life like art. He said art like art is what's in the museums and the institutions. It's object-based. Life like art is art that imitates life. It's more like the performative. And of course, I obviously really liked that, supported it, and so my work was very much disparaged and criticized. I was called a social worker rather than an artist. My art was social work. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't totally offended by that, but you are in an art school and you're supposed to be paid to teach art, and so, mine was art therapy, and it was a joke, and I mean, it was just, I remember I had a colleague in my first year of teaching who said, Sharon, you don't want these guys, you don't want to teach them too much. You don't want them to be better than you because they're going to be your competition one day. Well, needless to say, he's not an artist anymore, but that was just a kind of shocking first thing to hear. He and I were hired at the same time, and I was just stunned by that. Well, anyway, after the worst of all that intimidation occurred, I began to struggle with a very real depression. I mean, year after year, it started to really get to me, and they say anger turned inwards is depression. So I got on antidepressants, went to see a shrink, and he said, Sharon, you have what was called an exogenous depression. It means it's coming from somewhere very real. Nonetheless, you need medication because you're having a hard time, and I was. And the stuff gave me terrible anxiety, and I had to stop. But I started to study martial arts. I decided I needed to move my body and to get out of this depression. It was a way of centering and dealing with the stress. I wasn't going to be when I couldn't stand in an aerobics class, I'd get too fidgety. So my research into the bodily dimension of knowledge had already led me to explore ritual and gesture, and the martial arts just seemed like a really good fit. I'd explored a lot too in my earlier works, and you've seen some of here, a lot of Judeo-Christian kinds of rituals,